He is Robin Leech. This is Car Keys, Thanksgiving edition. Hi, Robin. How are you?
Fine. I'm just great. How are you?
Will not complain. What's going on?
Okay. Well, we've got cold weather, and with cold weather, it brings back the electric vehicles and even hybrid vehicles range situations to the focus. So I'll start out with that because I have actually recently had discussions with a couple of people with electric vehicles who have made note of that particular situation, that being, and if your car is sitting outside especially, not so much if it's in a heated garage before you drive it, and you go out and you think you've got a full charge range of, let's say, between 220 and 320, which is probably the ranges of many of the vehicles that are now currently available in electric-only mode, you're likely to suffer the potential of maybe as much as a 20% degrading in range if you are driving these vehicles in cold weather. A little bit higher at nighttime, a little bit lower in the daytime, but because you're using many of the same accessories, i.e. heat, mainly in the daytime only, heat maybe, along with radio and whatever, versus nighttime use, which would include heat, headlights, and whatever else is used more consumption-wise heavily at nighttime, your range will be down if you're driving any extensive distance, which most people aren't. It is very clear that the world at a couple of levels is really ready for all electric vehicles to become a normal purchase for many types of owners, mostly those who are probably not extensively ranged highway driving types of people. Any of these vehicles that go between 220 and 320 miles on a charge will probably have very comfortable daily use abilities without a lot of worrying about range. However, that is assuming you are not driving more than the stated full charge range that these vehicles can give you on a daily basis. If you are to try to drive at those using these ranges or exceeding the ranges of these vehicles, you could be in trouble for a lot of frustrating, well, some, if not a lot, frustrating problems, not the least of which might not be psychological anxiety. And I say that because I've just finished reading an article waiting to do this show from a reporter for Automotive News whose titled article in the latest issue of Automotive News is called Road Warrior, and it says, subdat, 300 miles in an electric F-150 reveals charging gaps. Along with those charging gaps, there were two issues. The program in the truck, which tells you in all electric vehicles where you can find charging stations, does not know a couple of things about charging stations. One, and the most important one is they don't know whether the charging stations that they may be leading you to are in working condition. And the second issue is if there's only one charging station at this particular location you might be led to, you could find yourself waiting in line. In this particular case, it was only one vehicle because that's all it takes to be in line at a time to get to be able to recharge your vehicle to continue on whatever trip you're taking. And in this case, it was a 300-mile round trip that this reporter was taking. And it was a very good article about what is still a problem with considering buying electric vehicles if you're trying to drive these kinds of distances, let's say in a day's work or a day's pleasure. Along with the fact that he did run into two areas, two zones where there were non-working charging ports because they were out of service. Another problem that he found was that many of the charging stations were not in very convenient locations for you to charge your vehicle if you want to do something in the particular location where there were other things to do where the charging stations were located. In one case, one was on level 1 of a 5-level parking garage. The actual location at first glance was not readily findable by the driver of the vehicle. Another case, they were located a rather long distance from shops. Now, long walk distance is a relative situation. It's not very long if it's just less than 2 to 3 minutes to get to shops or a shop if you want to go and leave your vehicle charging while you go do something like buying something or having lunch or something like that. But in some cases, the charging stations were longer than a 2 to 3 minute walk to places where he could do something. And I, too, have noticed, as I'm starting to notice where charging stations are, that often they are not readily, ideally located so that it's got cold weather outside. It can be an inconvenient time of walking to get to what you want to do while your car is being charged. The other issue was the power of the charging stations varies. Level 3 is now currently, I believe, the highest and quickest level of charge you can put into a vehicle if the charging station is a level 3 charger. But as he noted in the article, they cost over $80,000 or above to install a level 3 charger, whereas most of the chargers that are currently around the country apparently are between level 1 and level 2. Each of those two levels taking a much longer time to recharge your battery than the level 3. He mentioned that the level 3 charger could have recharged him to an 80% level to go to the next stage of his trip in an hour or less, whereas level 1 is hours and level 2 is over an hour. So that's a short and long situation dealing with electric charging or electric vehicles at this point. I'm not sure the grid will be ready for the higher level chargers because they're expensive to put in and they cost a lot more probably to charge your vehicle. Although the only time he had to charge his vehicle twice before he was able to get back to his original starting point. And one point said he put in $30 and he charged, it turned out to be only $4 worth of charging costs to get where he needed to go next. But on the other hand, finally he said there was one place where it cost him $4 to charge his vehicle up to a longer range to go 25 miles longer to get to where he wanted to go, which he said was more than more than it would cost for the equivalent amount of gasoline. That was an interesting situation, too, because there's a lot of discussion about whether or not you're saving a lot of money with electric cars in charging port and refueling costs than gasoline. Certainly more than diesel. Certainly less expensive than diesel. But I think we're at the point where, yes, the world is ready for local driving electric vehicle owners to buy those vehicles as opposed to longer driving drivers to buy them at this point. I think it's shown that that's what's going on around our broadcast area because the people that have got the RAV4 hybrids, Teslas, and all the other makes that are coming on, Kia and Hyundai, for example, I see more and more of them showing up on the roads around here. I'm going to move from this topic, which I think we're finished with, to two brands that are coming out with significantly improved versions of vehicles that, in one case, has been on a road around the country for over 20 years, and that's the Toyota Prius. Jay may have mentioned on an earlier show, and he's not with us today, but he was getting ready to discuss the death knell for the Toyota Prius because he said people didn't want them because they were not looking very well, and they'd run their course. Suddenly, Toyota has announced a brand new designed Prius with a lot of the performance enhancements, but identical or better improved mileage capabilities, and a vehicle that looks suddenly very modern and very slick. And both he and I think it's going to revamp the sales of that particular model in the Toyota lineup when it arrives in the dealerships, either very late or the beginning or middle of 2023, if not sooner. So Prius owners, get ready to see a new vision of the Prius, a new view of the Prius, with a lot more exciting features if you want to drive something besides drive a vehicle that just simply gets mileage that exceeds all the estimates on its normal sticker, window sticker. The next vehicle that is evoking interest in my mind, and Jay says he's also seen pictures of it too, but not the vehicle yet on the road, is a new Hyundai Ioniq 6, all electric. And I watched the intro of it online a few days before this show, and it is really, for a tech-minded person, really cool. I'm not sure the mainstream buyers of it will ever use all the things that this vehicle has, but it's got high capacity charging rates, capability. There'll be over-the-air updates, which is coming to all cars in the next 5 years probably, where the manufacturers can send updates to the computer systems that all these cars are now inputting their cars and making and taking their cars to new levels of driving capability without having to go to the dealer to get things upgraded. So those are two vehicles that I think are going to be very successful for their respective manufacturers going forward. And they are both, the Prius is in a lower price category because the old Priuses used to start right around $20,000, and they worked their way up into the 30s. I suspect this new Prius will be starting in the 20s, albeit a bit higher up, and maybe getting into the 40s. But that's still going to be less expensive than many of the electric vehicles, total electric vehicles are today, which seem to be $40,000 and going up very quickly above that. And this is before any kind of tax incentives, give-backs that may or may not be around for a long time to come. That's that, I guess, on the electric front, I believe.
Right, but I still think, let me put it differently. I know people who have had Priuses, who gave up their Priuses, and who want their Priuses back.
Okay.
So just I will throw that out there.
I'm not surprised at that.
No, it's a much...
the Prius, when it came out, was really the leader in hybrid vehicles that got excellent mileage, partly because of its aerodynamic design, as much as anything, plus high mileage giving tire designs, which meant low rolling resistance or lower rolling resistance, and tires not designed for higher mileage range. But it got a little, in my view, it got a little tired in its design. And when they redesigned the first generation of the Prius, they put what I call a rather, I guess I'll use the word ugly rear end on it, and to a lesser degree, a less desirable front, which has been out for, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 years. And their sales have probably not plummeted because of that. I think their sales have fallen mainly because they've run the course of sort of market saturation, which is something that I think happens for certain designs of cars over time. But this new Prius design is really exciting, and from the standpoint of those of us who've watched the older Priuses be around. Plus, they've got a lot of performance features which are going to be really make the car a more fun more fun car to drive than the current generation and the earlier generation Priuses tended to be. Plus, they come with all-wheel drive, which the current generation also comes with, which was not around in the first generation. They were all front-wheel drive. So all-wheel drive takes care of, continues to take care of cars for all types of weather, as opposed to limiting them to maybe the sunnier climes where you didn't have a lot of snow. And boy, recent weather conditions in some parts of our country have really made it very clear that all-wheel drive vehicles still get stuck, just like two-wheel drive vehicles, but they also will get you a lot further before they get stuck. And it really becomes the driver's problem if the driver gets stuck in an all-wheel drive vehicle because they think it can do more than it actually can do. But so all-wheel drive is certainly something that is really a good option, if not standard, drivetrain to have in vehicles, not limited to just southern non-snow climates. Another test, I like these tests because while I can't do them, they do give a very good insight into the various characteristics of competing types of vehicles with similar, in this case, powertrain systems, meaning electric at this point. And one of the car magazines had a showdown test between the Ford F-150 Lightning and the Rivian RIT pickup truck. And I think the subjective choice of the magazine, which turned out to be the Ford over the Rivian, was by such a slim margin. I think it really comes down to a buyer's potential interest in the features that each truck has that the other one doesn't. And there are some significant feature differences between the Rivian and the Ford, which are pointed out in the article. But some were technical, and some were just physical. But it was one of the longest articles I've ever read in one of my car magazines on any kind of road test. Very in-depth, very revealing, but they left out one thing which I think has been proven for those who might exceed the functional use of some of the electric trucks if they buy one thinking that it can do more than it actually would do. And that has been mentioned in this show before by myself, where somebody really loaded up an electric pickup with a load that met the load capacity rating of the truck, possibly even exceeding it, and the range that the truck represented that it could do of, I think, 300 miles or 280 miles was diminished so much by the load that it would make it unsaleable to people who wanted to tow the kind of load that the tester did to show how bad the range would be, would diminish if it were loaded up to its actual rated capacity. But it did not come up as being a range problem in the test that this magazine did, but they only put in about a 500-pound load in the back of these pickup trucks, which turns out not to have caused any range diminution beyond what it was on the sticker or what the trucks were able to carry.
What is the typical weight, though?
Well, the Ford F-150, I think, has a load. The electric Lightning has a load hauling rating or a load rating of 10,000 pounds. Even if it were 9,000 pounds, I think the Rivian also has the same. But if you put anything under, 1,000 pounds or maybe even 2,000 pounds in the pickup beds of either of these vehicles, apparently you're not going to have too much of a diminished range situation, at least during normal weather conditions, which in this case would be well above freezing in my mind. I'm not sure what hot weather does to these batteries. Nothing that I've read has said that in climates where you might have 100 degrees, you might have the same kind of range problem.
Probably sets them on fire instead.
Reduction. I
Sorry.
don't know about that, but
I know
it's possible.
But I mean, too much heat isn't. This is all perfect in a vacuum, or shall I say, in a controlled environment. It becomes more it requires more thought, I would say.
True.
When
I would
that
agree
is,
with you.
That's all.
I think a lot of these early, I'm seeing more Rivians around, and I've seen only 2 electric Lightnings in our neck of the woods, but they're apparently showing up more. They're harder to distinguish from the to a practiced eye they probably aren't, but to a non-practiced eye, the Ford electrics are probably harder to quickly distinguish as being the electric version of the pickup than the all-new Rivian is, which is only in electric form. There isn't a fossil fuel Rivian out there, and it's so new and its design so unique, you can't miss a Rivian either from its behind or the front when you see one coming down the road with the lighting design and the front fascia and the rear pickup fascia. But pickups of this type are being, I think, purchased by people who are barely using them for any kind of load capacity that would possibly diminish the range on a normal daily driving situation. There's no question that the owners of the vehicles I have seen in both the Fords that are around our corner that I saw and the people that I've seen driving them in the Rivians, more in Fairfield County, Connecticut than up in the northwest corner, although there are several up there. They've been purchased by people who are not probably ever going to put a whole lot of stuff in. They may go skiing in them and put skis and a lot of stuff in the pickup bed, but those items or types of items do not add significant load factor to the trucks to cause a possible reduction in range if they were going to take these trucks, like say, to a ski area as much as 200 miles away from their home. However, they would certainly want to be able to find a place at a ski area, I would think, where they could plug these vehicles in to charge while they were enjoying their skiing on the slopes during the course of the day, because if they go up 200 miles, they got to come back 200 miles, and I don't think either the Rivian or the Ford F-150 has a range of 400 miles without having a lot of range anxiety and probably not making that round trip in one charge like the guy who tested the Ford 150 for a 300-mile trip. And one of the things go back to that for a moment, one of the things that he found was when he found a charging station that was incapacitated or else otherwise occupied, or for whatever reason, he found one at a locked place he couldn't get in because it was at some place where it was in a gated area, but it was on his computer, it was on his screen saying it was available. And another one did not tell him that a charging station where there were 6 or 8 ports was a Tesla-only charging station, and he couldn't plug it into his truck.
Well,
so he had to go around and drive extra miles to find charging stations, which further reduced the amount of
I know.
He could go.
I just have to interrupt to say that A, you're out of time, but B, anyone anyone who has some internet familiarity at this point knows that some percentage of the time they're going to be sent on a goose chase. That
is correct. Absolutely.
All right. Happy Thanksgiving. He is Robin Leech. This is Car Keys.